How's it going, 10th family and friends? Actually recording here from my dorm room at Hobart College in Geneva, New York. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of you saw the video that came out on Saturday about the prisoner exchange. Now, like I said in the beginning of that video, it has a very long backstory, and I would release a video right about now detailing what exactly happened. So this is going to be completely unscripted. I'm going to watch through the video and basically explain what happened and why it happened, and you guys can get a good idea of how the whole scenario went down, because there's a whole lot that happened that wasn't in that video. Alright, so it's like 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock max, and we had just finished our morning skirmish, and we had taken off all of our gear, all of our cartridge boxes were stowed away, and we were getting ready for lunch, called nooning, because it's generally right around noon. And I actually get a tap on the shoulder from, I think it was Matt Zembo of the 34th, and you'll see him here in a second. The 34th are the guys with the yellow facings like us, just different helmets. And basically what he said was, we're going on another patrol. You guys wear yellow facings, we wear yellow facings. It'll look good if we all go on patrol together. You want to get some of your guys, and we'll make this patrol happen. And I was like, yep. I mean, I've got to check with my sergeant, obviously, if we're going to do something like that. And so I went to Dylan, my sergeant, and I said, he wants to go on patrol. And so he gave me the good to go, and so a bunch of our guys came and trickled in and kind of filled into this little line that was going on at the bottom of this hill. So basically what we were told was that we were at the bottom of this hill, and at the top of the hill there was like a group of redcoats, and it looked like a group of rebels, and we were told that basically there was a prisoner exchange going on at the top of the hill, and we were going to wait until the very end of the prisoner exchange and then go attack their advanced camp. And we were told specifically at the beginning of the event that we actually weren't allowed to attack the American camp itself, only the advanced camp, which is like a smaller camp for people quote-unquote campaigning, sleeping kind of under the stars, a little less of a formal camp setup. So that's actually a very important part of the story for later on. So, so basically, we're sitting at the bottom of this hill, and then all of a sudden, one of the guys from the 4th Foot comes running down this hill. And he's running, and at first I heard him, I thought I heard Zaslow, which is my last name, and so I look up, and I was like, he can't be talking about me. I mean, I'm a private, and he says, we need Sergeant Zaslow, and it was a little confusing for the guys at the bottom of the hill, because Zembo of the 34th is a sergeant, so we were confused whether he was saying Sergeant Zembo or if he actually meant me, Private Zaslow. But he said that he clarified he was told Sergeant Zaslow of the 10th Foot. So basically, I start running up this hill all alone. There's nobody behind me, and I had no idea what I was walking into, literally no idea. And right about here, I see Nick Dalrymple from the 1st New York. Now I'm going to pause the video here. So the 1st New York, they're a great unit. In fact, if you are living in upstate New York and you are looking to join a Rev War unit, the 1st New York is a great group, and I'd highly recommend them. And I actually go to school in upstate New York, so I've fielded with these guys on a couple of occasions. And Nick is a great guy, and he actually said he had a surprise in store for me at Chase Farm, because he knew I would be back with the 10th and being a redcoat. So as soon as I see him, I think you can hear me audibly say, oh no, because I know nothing good is going to happen out of this. So basically, so I get to the top of the hill, and Izzy Provencha, who's the commander of the British Army at Chase Farm, he gets up and he says, good morning, and he says, oh, can you read? And I said, yep, I can read. And he hands me this paper to read. And in short, what this basically was a warrant from, I think it was 1777, I'll correct that if I'm wrong, that was, crafted, edited a little bit, of a prisoner exchange in the time period. So basically, I just run all the way up this hill, and I'm totally out of breath when I reach the top. And so I'm trying to read this thing, and I'm all out of breath, and so it's pretty crazy. It was pretty hard for me to read it, just because I didn't have any breath left from running up that hill. So basically what happened is Nick chose me to be the Redcoat exchanged because I had fielded with him and his unit at 2 other events, and he basically ratted me out as a spy to Izzy and the other British command. And in fact, Izzy for the event had actually grabbed 2 of the settlers at the bottom of this hill to exchange as prisoners, and Nick said, "Oh, you know, we don't want them, we want Sergeant Zazzle." And actually, that's where Sergeant came in, because I told Nick that I might be getting some commanding duties for the weekend, and so he assumed that I was going to be a sergeant, but in fact, I'm still a private. So anyway, I'm basically reading my own death warrant, and that'll allow me to get exchanged for the prisoner, the American prisoner. And you can see, actually, over there, I'll point an arrow out. That's Brandon of the 1st New York, and Brandon is basically has the story but the opposite of me. So at Fort Ticonderoga, apparently, he had been posted as a picket, and the Redcoats had attacked him, and instead of like firing on the Redcoats and then going and telling his camp like you're supposed to do as a picket, he surrendered and gave them all his ammunition, and then proceeded to later in the later battle to just desert and run over to the British side. So they were actually supposed to execute him earlier that day, and there's footage of this too that I'll roll right now, where he's all lined up for execution, and they have the firing squad at present, which is the step right before fire, and then someone comes running in saying like, hold your fire, like we're going to postpone this, we're going to do a prisoner exchange. So basically the idea was that Brandon, who's an American traitor, was going to be traded, like prisoner exchanged, for me, supposedly a British traitor, when meanwhile, I mean, you know, it is what it is. Like, I fielded with them, but I am definitely a loyal Redcoat, and you'll see later in the video that I do escape. So, yep, so I'm reading this, and it's basically saying if I return to the British camp or whatever, I'll be executed as a spy. And same goes for Brandon if he returns to the American camp. So they exchange me, and Nick says, you know, it's good to have you back in our ranks, and I get sent back behind the guards here. That's Paul of the 1st New York. So yeah, so now I'm really have no idea now I know what's going on, but you know, I don't know what's going to happen next. So it was pretty exciting for me. What makes this also so lucky that this ended up happening was really only like 3 or 4 of the high command in the American Army knew about this. Matt Zembo had no idea. Matt Zembo, the guy that got me for the patrol, had no idea that this was going to happen and I was the target. So, you know, I could have just declined the patrol. I could have said like, oh, you know, we're getting ready for lunch. I don't want to do a patrol or whatever. And you know, he may not even have found me either. You know, he was looking for 10th guys, but I just happened to be there. And so yeah, I mean, it could have just not happened like this altogether. And Alan Torrey, he says, you know, oh, he's not our prisoner, like, you don't need to treat him like a prisoner, he's loyal to us. And he actually comes in and hands me a beer. At first, when he hands me that, I thought it was milk because it was so frothy and white, but it was actually a beer. And then the detachment walks off. So then we're heading back, and pause right there. That is Bob Allegretto. He comes in later in the story, so just remember that guy. He's known as Bob the Horse Guy because he usually rides a horse, but at this event he was not riding a horse. So yeah, we're walking back to the American camp, and meanwhile we're laughing the whole time, like, because I had no idea this was coming. Even the American side had no idea this was coming. Only Nick, Alan, and I think, you know, a couple other guys on the American side had any idea that I was the one being exchanged. So you'll hear Mysterious Mr. X multiple times throughout the video, and Mysterious Mr. X, I guess that was my code name. They knew that they were exchanging for a Mysterious Mr. X, but no one knew my actual name, and X obviously from my from the 10th Regiment of Foot, and there's a big X on my cap as well, so people thought that was kind of funny. So yeah, some high-ranking American officers. I don't really know exactly how the command structure works in the American Army. They're telling me like, oh, welcome aboard. So yeah, they're saying, oh, good to have you. So yeah, so then basically we get dismissed, and all the 1st New York guys, who I know now pretty well, and they're all saying hi. This is their camp here. Yeah, so then we sit down to have lunch, and they gave me beer, food, everything, and I take off my kit, and then literally probably around 5, maybe 10 minutes max later, there was some gunshots that were heard, lots of them. And what you can't see from this video was immediately when the gunshots started, I mean, just lots of rebels, Americans, just running out of their tents. It was actually pretty cool to see like how they responded to the alarm. So basically, we thought that they were probably coming to rescue me, which in fact turned out to be the case. That the British were coming back to rescue me. I guess maybe they had figured out I wasn't exactly a spy or whatnot. But again, like I said earlier, the British were only allowed to attack the American camp, and or the American advance camp rather. And so we decide, okay, why don't we bring me up to the advance camp at least to give the British a chance to come and rescue me. So I go up in my full red coat uniform, and we're walking up there, and as soon as we get up there, like, the shooting has basically stopped. Like, there's no shooting, and we get up there, and you can't really see here, but there's probably at least half a dozen redcoats just, like, dead all over the ground. So obviously the mission had failed, that had come to rescue me. And we're walking around, and then we see in another field over here that there's a redcoat lying down. And he was still rolling around, he's still moving. So basically at this point, you know, I'm just trying to think of ways to escape, because obviously, you know, I'm a redcoat at heart, and I want to find ways to escape. And they had guys on me the whole time. Like, even though I wasn't really their prisoner, so to say, I'll pause that. Even though I wasn't really their prisoner, so to say, they still didn't trust me exactly. So I was trying to gain trust in their eyes. So we see this redcoat here, and he ends up being a lad from the 54th, a young kid. I think his name's Richard. And so we get to him, and I was like, oh, you know, like, Nick, I was like, oh, you want me to finish him? And Nick looks at me, and he goes like, yeah, like, he laughs almost. You can see his reaction is pretty funny. So we get to this kid, and we're standing above him, and he's got his hat over his head. And we pull his hat off and realize, oh, you know, he's a young kid. We're telling him don't move, obviously, because he's about to get bayoneted. We don't want him to like move his body into the bayonet and get stabbed. So he didn't move, and I bayoneted him, and that was basically what I needed to gain the trust of Nick and the other Continental soldiers with me. He was going to die out anyway. There was no way that any of the other redcoats could come and help him. So that's what I figured. You know, I was giving him an easy, quick death, as opposed to laying there, and I get the trust of the American forces. So yeah, so basically I knew I'd gotten the trust, because now Nick is going around telling everybody that I had bayoneted a redcoat, and he thought it was pretty funny that, like, it was a redcoat bayoneting another redcoat, and he was telling people that. So people were giving me space. So right about here, actually, so that's Dave Bernier right there. He's, I think, the overall commander of the American forces, and I start to, like, saunter away to see what Nick and Dave would say, and he's like, oh, are you sure you want to have a guy on him? And Nick's like, oh, he's trustworthy. So at that point, I knew, like, okay, I'm trustworthy. So we're walking. He says, oh, let's go get lunch. So we're walking back, and I see the other two redcoats. The last thing I wanted to do was make it back to camp. I knew I had to make my escape before we got back to camp, because the 1st New York camp was, like, right smack in the middle of the American camp. And I knew if I tried to run, it would be a lot harder of a time. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go talk to these redcoats. And I was like, okay, this is going to be where I have to make my escape. So, you know, I walk around to the other side, I guess, here, put the redcoats between me and the militia, and then I take off. So I'm running, and actually I was told, like, people have asked, like, oh, did anyone try to chase after you, like, right there, and I was told that Matt Solander leveled his musket at me, but a redcoat stepped in the way, and he wasn't able to fire. So I'm running, and then basically I thought I'd covered enough distance. I didn't hear anybody behind me, so I stop to fix my cue, which is like the part of my wig that fits up into my cap. So you can see me doing that in my shadow. And I turn, and that right there, that is Bob Allegretto, Bob the horse guy, who was actually on picket duty during that whole prisoner exchange, and he came and chased after me, and saw me and came and chased after me. So I'm running, and he's fast. I mean, you saw how much distance I had between him and me. He closed that distance really fast. He was right on my tail for a good 3-4 seconds, and actually, I didn't have this in the original film, but I stop and I turn around, and I'll roll this right now. He was far away, and he wasn't doing anything. So I'm looking at him like, you know, are you going to shoot me? What are you going to do? And he wasn't doing anything. So I still had cartridges in my cartridge box, because keep in mind, the original goal behind this patrol was we were going to go attack the camp. So I still had a bunch of cartridges. So I take one out, and I rip it open, and I'm still looking at him like I want him to tell me whether I can do this or not, like whether this is allowed. So I rip it open, prime my musket, shut the pan, load the musket as well, and I'm looking at him, and I still don't, like, I'm waiting for him to give me, like, the good to go, or not good to go, to like, shoot at him. And then basically at the end, I was like, oh, like, you think this is allowed? And he's like, I wouldn't do it here. So then I turn and keep running. And so yeah, I mean, it would have been pretty cool if I'd killed him, but you know, it is what it is. So yeah, so then I make it back to camp, and it's just in time they had sat down for lunch, and actually I see Brandon, who was the guy I exchanged, and I know him kind of well too from the 1st New York, and he was having a great time in our camp, eating lunch. He helped us clean our dishes. So now, like, the going story is that Brandon's, like, secretly just a Brit, and he just wants to be a redcoat. So yeah, that's the story of that, and exactly what happened. It was pretty confusing, I know, between me, like, pretending to be, like, me in the 1st New York, and being exchanged for a 1st New York guy. And but anyway, that's the backstory to it, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and stay posted for the next ones.